skills like Giovanni.
The businessman in me respects the low effort we make.
Just put them in seats here in the sunny room. We're about going with the same room anyway. Okay, and now we're finally moving on to the switch game. Starting with Pokemon, let's go to the field.
They're looking at his Pokemon skills and training. They replace Gary, who's actually a good rival between players. To make matters worse, you can only access the Pokemon.
Scott Melton, you're just an old woman who can't appreciate new stuff.
You literally railed against Chris Fox.
I'm talking he's also goes and I've spoken with the local around the site. This is the way we always imagine. Let's be honest, Joe. The Let's Show games were just them dipping their toes into the Switch hardware. The games faithfully recreate Kanto, but they don't do much else. The games are born of sideways movement from Pokemon Yellow, setting aside the graphical improvement. Kanto was still as boring as it was back in the day. That's the trainers meant for a 6-4 post on the food. Appreciate it.
Straight to the F tier.
I want to make too much time. The Let's Go games were a fun little test, but they aren't worth much more than one playthrough, and even that stretch. F tier. Now we're finally on Generation 8 with Pokemon Silver. Let's address the elephant in the room. Benson. Yeah, we're losing a certain Pokemon that are just plain unattainable in Silver Field, and this practice continues into the following Switch title.
We open this can of worms discussion. Their characters and plot stuff too. The bad guy's motivation is preventing the energy crisis. This is going to be a problem.
Alpha Pokemon have an energy crisis when electric, fire, flying, and water Pokemon can all generate the necessary forces they emphasize. I will give them a few facts for Hop. Many people write him off as how 2.0, but Hop actually does have a bit of a character mark after he loses to be becoming a more serious battle. Too bad that's all you really get.
Be on the face. Beat is annoying and common. The only reason people like to read is because you can keep talking.
Well, we got a list of Gen 3 finally making DLC instead of a third version.
The Sword and Shield DLC is actually just games content.
Yeah, except the truth is they can add the actual Pokemon into the game instead of just the content.
And what about this generation thinking of Dynamax Pokemon? It's the same evolution of genes to join another generation, another gimmick.
Sword and Shield does make the wild area and locations for us to encounter Pokemon roaming in the overworld. But it's like an ocean that's 1,000 miles wide and 200 deep. A failed attempt to emulate Breath of the Wild.
I legitimately cannot think of anything special about Sword and Shield last year.
Don't agree. Sword and Shield were not a great first step to the first-name console Pokemon game. The only thing, and actually the only thing I can do is that they made getting to the competitive Pokemon a good deal less tedious thanks to the nature mix, bottle caps, and ability caps.
Games are still pretty apt, though.
Agreed. Moving on, we have the remakes of the 4th gen games, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl.
More like Brilliant Fusion and Shining Pearl. They once again decided to remake the inferior versions of the 4th gen game. No platinum elements at all. They didn't even include the Battle Frontier, grossly cutting down the post-game content.
I'm personally not a fan of the art design either. It looks like they were going through the same field as the Link's Awakening remake, but it just isn't fitting to.
I think it looks decent. Hell of a lot better than that flop of Sword and Shield.
I don't want to waste much time on the remake. I'm pretty sure the general consensus is that they're awful. But I will give it points for some of the post-game rematches against the gym leaders and Elite Four. They legitimately have competitive teams with good items, good sets, and ability.
The Final 50 rematch is crazy. Her team gets up into the 80s and starts on matching with the two of them.
Another failed Breath of the Wild clone.
Well, hold on now, George. Let's just ask you.
What's come over the down?
I'm surprised you isn't parroting that PlayStation 2 graphics meme everyone was showing out a year ago.
Relax. Let's hear Donovan.
Don't get me wrong, the next part should look like it has an awfully bland and uninspiring open world with one major settlement in it, and it has a mere fraction of the total amount of Pokemon. But this is the first main series Pokemon game to truly use something different. Instead of your badge, we get the normal Pokemon, which makes for fun, unique bosses. Legends of Arceus is also actually reaching the challenge, which is a step up from the recent Pokemon revival.
You're spinning down Legends of Arceus actually gives us a unique viewpoint of the Pokemon. Now we're finally getting to see them as the dangerous animals they are instead of our stupid and common sense.
And we get one of the craziest battles against my dude Bolo and the Ginkgo Guild.
And despite there being only one location in the game, even with villains with an ever-evolving players, thanks to lot of the side missions that are bringing Pokemon to help develop everything.
Legends Arceus have a lot of potential to be the most revolutionary Pokemon game I've ever seen. Unfortunately, the development of the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, which means that you get proper attention.
Let's rank Arceus first. I need a speech here. I agree, Brock. Arceus is the best ship Pokemon game. Now we can wrap this up with Scarlet and Violet.
Comparing that to the disaster to the Pokemon game, how in the fuck did this game look worse than Legends Arceus? What excuse is there for the insane frame rate drops when Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee demanded a stable 30 FPS? Why does the difficulty go all the way back down to 0? You gotta be the worst champion today, yes, the worst that they answer.
How long have you been holding that in, Donald?
The entire video, I'm done talking about Scarlet and Violet. They're empty games.
I'm fully committed to slide in 126. That means that we're fully committed to my health and well-being. No excuses. That means feeding my body with healthy food and staying consistent at the gym. That means prioritizing quality sleep and managing stress. That means visiting the team at Popeye Supplements for expert advice and trusted products to help accelerate results and keep me on track. They're here to help you.
I'm done talking about Pokemon for today too. The franchise might be more successful than ever before, but it's dead where it's not as close in my life.
Well, alrighty then. Donald already said everything bad about the game, so why don't we talk about the good?
And another thing, Game Freak is literally 0 for 3 with open world Pokemon games. Knock it the fuck off already. They can't do it. Go back to Let's Go style games with decent stories, good challenges, and sizable post games. Not every game needs to be open world.
Okay, the good. Scarlet and Violet do admittedly give us more to do than just gyms, evil teams, Elite Four, and a battle tower. You've got 3 sets of main stories to follow between the gyms, the Titan Pokemon, and Team Star. Team Star was kind of mid, if I'm being honest. They're just gyms by a different name. And the only difference is it's about a bunch of kids who got bullied at the school. Speaking of which, the school part of these games is underutilized.
I do think the Titan Pokemon story makes for a decent challenge and has a more sympathetic storyline. Arvin trying to cure his old Mabop stiff is a touching tale, just a boy and his dog.
The gyms are just standard stuff. Nimona is a decent rival, especially since she's apparently already a champion. But as usual, because these games are so piss easy, it's not like she ever feels like a champion.
I'm normally more understanding of these types of things, and I know Scarlet and Violet sold insanely well like all Pokemon games do. But I can't pretend like these games aren't a massive problem.
Even though Scarlet and Violet are better than Sword and Shield, it would be irresponsible to ignore all the technical issues. The shutdowns, lag, bugs, the terrible art design on top of the graphics. It's all just unforgivable. The best I can give these games is a C tier. It's the first true open world game that has good characters, but it's just so incomplete. You're a nicer man than me, Barack. The fact that some people blame the Switch for Scarlet and Violet when it runs Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom far better makes me hate the game even more. Sure, the Switch isn't exactly the best console on the market, but you could put these games on a PS5 and they would probably still look and run like pure truth. Scarlet and Violet belong with their predecessor in F tier.
I'll give it a D tier for trying to do something different and actually having a real open world. It's just too bad the entire game lacks focus and looks like it's being held together with duct tape and glue.
Well, George, it was good talking to you. I was planning on ranking starters later if you're down for that. Oh, hell yeah, Barack, get me in on that.
Should I call Donald back?
He's going to whine if you don't, so go ahead. All right, y'all stay safe out there, drink plenty of water, get some sleep, and we'll see you on the next one.
You want to listen to this audio hit, it's from the Sportsnet website. What's the likelihood of an EP40 trade this season? And, quite self-explanatorily, the hosts on the program, plus Frank Saravelli, they talk about the idea of Elias Pettersson getting traded, and they primarily talk about the Detroit Red Wings as a destination. Stick around in this commentary, let's discuss the idea. It's not a new one, I would say. We've gone over the idea of Elias Pettersson to Detroit in the past. But this time, there is a little bit more urgency, I would say. Mostly due to the fact that the Vancouver Canucks are in a much more volatile spot. This is a team that is last in the league by a pretty big margin. They're 4 points back of second last place. That's terrible. And the Vancouver Canucks, for what it's worth, are looking at a rebuild. You had some moments, some interviews done with Jim Rutherford about rebuilding and restarting everything. Maybe not tearing it down to the studs, but just kind of letting the youth ride in. And with conversations starting out that the Vancouver Canucks are now going to listen to offers on everybody on their team. Nobody is untouchable, it seems. Naturally, Elias Pettersson's name has entered the mix. And it seems like, based off of what Frank Saravalli said on the program, there are teams asking about Petey. It is a realistic idea at this point. Now, as for the Detroit Red Wings, Ruff brought up on the radio program that, hey, the Canucks and the Wings have already had discussions about trades this season because the Red Wings were in on Quinn Hughes. As Saravalli brought up, yeah, no, the Wings have already made a trade that was significant with the Vancouver Canucks in the Philip Pronik deal. So already there is some history between these GMs, Patrick Allvin and Stevie Y. Although you could say maybe Steve Yzerman was negotiating for Quinn Hughes with Jim Rutherford rather than Patrick Allvin. But is there an opportunity for these guys to tango one more time? I really like the idea of Elias Pettersson with the Detroit Red Wings. If you just remove the dollar amount, remove the cap shenanigans, remove whatever the trade price would be, and you just think of Petey the guy playing for Detroit as a second-line center behind Dylan Larkin, maybe Pettersson will finally start scoring again. In fact, not even maybe. He will. If this guy is playing with Alex DeBrincat and Patrick Kane, he's going to get himself a ton more points. He's playing with Linus Karlsson and Evander Kane with the Vancouver Canucks. Linus Karlsson was an AHL guy last year. Evander Kane sucks. Jake DeBrusk and Brock Besser can't find the back of the net to save their lives this season. And Connor Garland is reasonably good, but he's not scoring either. Vancouver is not equipping Elias Pettersson with the necessary pieces around him to succeed, even though Pettersson has been Vancouver's best forward as of late. It's not even a debate. He's been the most productive guy ever since the turn of the calendar, and he still is only at 6 points in his last 10 games. He hasn't produced a lot, but compared to every other Vancouver Canuck, oh boy, it's a lot. Pettersson has found an element to his game that I think is stable at this point. He is not a superstar game-breaking guy. He's not a 100-point player right now. But it seems like, based off of all the information we're hearing, the Vancouver Canucks are willing to trade Pettersson despite knowing in their hearts that he is going to bounce back and be a better player elsewhere. And it seems like the value of Pettersson on the market is not going to be significantly reduced because other teams might be feeling that same way too. They're seeing Petey saying, hey, okay, he's actually doing well. But look at his line. He's playing with Linus Karlsson. I mean, if he plays Patrick Kane, he probably plays better. Does he not? He probably scores more points. He's doing a lot of little things right. And I get it. Little things for 11.6 is not the best. But as Frank Saravalli said on yesterday's Halbro, we're getting to a point now with all these other contracts that are being signed, contract demands out of players like Alex Tuck, Connor is making 12, Kaprizov's making 17. It's getting to a point now where all of a sudden 11.6 doesn't seem like the worst thing in the world for a player like Elias Pettersson anymore. Maybe before the season began, before all of these shenanigans with the cap rising and contracts getting inflated and all this stuff started happening, before guys like Luke Hughes started getting $9 million a year, before all of that, I was like, okay, well, Elias Pettersson's making 11.6 and he had 45 points. That's not good. That's a really bad contract. Now it's like, all right, it's not that bad. He's playing better, he's scoring more, he's on a terrible team, and 11.6 isn't the end of the world anymore. So there seems to be a more open trade market for this guy, and an understanding between most of these teams that Pettersson is likely to start producing and succeeding more if he leaves Vancouver. Therefore, the Canucks might not actually get fleeced here if they end up trading Petey away and he ends up becoming a 100-point player again alongside of Kane and DeBrincat or whatever. Which brings us as to what exactly the trade could look like. Now, Vancouver would not...
I don't know what to do there, you. Oh, we're here. Thank you so much.
I got you.
Sam said, can you do me a favor?
Thanks, man. I owe you one.
Be getting Simon Edvinsson in return. I think we've already established that. Now, there is a little bit of a difference here. Obviously, if Vancouver gets Pettersson for Edvinsson, that would leave a big hole on Detroit's left side. I would have to think that Axel Sandin-Pellikka is the immediate centerpiece of the trade that makes it work for Vancouver, plus maybe another center coming. We're thinking ASP, we're thinking Danielson, we're thinking another first-round pick or something like that. I honestly start to think about it a lot more. Yeah, it's cheaper than what Quinn Hughes was supposedly going for, but then again, Quinn Hughes has more value. Elias Pettersson, also, with the fact that he is signed till the end of 2032, making $11.6 million a year, that does change the value a little bit compared to Quinn Hughes, who only has one more year left on the deal. If you are confident that EP40 can bounce back, that his Datsukian-style play would translate well onto the center position of a DeBrincat or Kane line, then maybe you toss in another draft pick, a third or something, just to sweeten the pot a little bit. You can compare Elias Pettersson trade talk to some other centers who had gotten moved, like Jack Eichel, for example, but you're not going to get the exact same valuation because Jack Eichel had a surgery that he needed to get, and there wasn't really that much clearance for him to go and get it, and there wasn't really a guarantee that he would ever be able to play hockey properly ever again. Elias Pettersson's not going through it that bad. He doesn't have to get life-changing surgery. He's just playing worse than before. And there is a big part of me that thinks, if Pettersson's going to a team that has a whole bunch of other Swedes. Vancouver's got some Swedes, of course, but Vancouver, Detroit, lots of Swedes on either of these teams. If Pettersson forms some sort of a connection with Johansson, Edvinsson, Sandin-Pellikka, Raymond, you could have a really nice power play unit with 3 defensemen for whatever reason you want to go out there and do that. Obviously, I'm joking, but Pettersson and Raymond, 2 Olympic Swedes alongside of each other in the National Hockey League. That sounds like a pretty good idea in my mind. You can let me know your thoughts, what you think about the idea of an Elias Pettersson trade over to Detroit. I'm engagement farming here. Alfred and Bruff really did talk about it with Sarah Bailey, and I like the idea a lot for both sides, as long as Vancouver doesn't get fleeced. You can let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. How do you feel about EP40 in Motown? I hope you enjoyed this video. Roll 9 and bye.
There are a total of 25 new actions of war in the DLC. Now, not to be confused with unique skills, those things are different. Okay, lots of yapping to be done. Today covering all the actions of war, 116 of them, now not to be confused with the unique skills. These are the regular skills that are which can be infused onto other weapons and that are in the form of an ash of war. Now, as always, the criteria for this is based on how well it performs and how useful it is in PvE. So for instance, a skill might be really good, but if it's outclassed by something else, it's probably going to get lower on the list. And also don't focus too hard on the placement of some of these skills, and probably draw your attention as to what I'm actually saying about them, and what tier I put them in. Because I guarantee if I did this exact same video next week, the list might look a little bit different, but one thing that's probably going to be the same is my opinion. But anyway, it's going to be a longer video, so let's get into it. Now, starting off in the D tier, right at the bottom, we have Sky Shots. Now, the D tier is going to consist of the worst of the worst, like basically things that are just useless, and even if it does have a very specific use, it's probably just inevitably outclassed by something else anyway. And as for Sky Shot, this is a bow-based skill that shoots a singular arrow up in the sky, it takes forever to land, gets 0 tracking, obviously does pretty poor damage because it is an arrow, and even if enemies are the slightest bit mobile, it is just going to miss. If you're indoors, it's going to hit the ceiling. Like, the only use that I could possibly think of this thing is that it can hit enemies around the wall, but the thing is you can't even lock onto enemies that are around the wall, and also if you actually use the Rain of Arrows skill without FP, it basically does the exact same thing as this dumbass skill, Storm Wall, which is a parrying-based skill that actually can deflect projectiles. Now, it isn't only for physical-based projectiles like arrows and fire bombs, which is basically just useless because those are just very slow-moving projectiles that don't even do much damage anyway, like just dodge or just walk a little bit. And as this thing pertains to a parrying-based skill, it gives you just as many parry frames as like a medium shield parry, which is basically just useless. 114 Enchanted Shot, which is another bow-based skill. This one actually giving tracking to one of your arrows, which actually is kind of borderline useless because the damage is still going to suck, and the only purpose is trying to kite enemies out one at a time, which you can already do that with like the regular bow moveset. If you could infuse this onto like a great bow, I might find some more value in it because they actually perform better as a sniping-based option. Number 113, Officer's Barrier, which is another parry-based skill. This one not really giving you any more parry frames than anything else, but it only gives you the ability to be able to parry magic-based projectile attacks, which Counter Retaliation is just going to outclass this, because Counter Retaliation doesn't consume any FP also. When you're getting a regular parry, it's going to give you more parry. And if you do parry magic-based projectile, it's going to actually turn it into your own magic projectile and turn it back after. 112 Windfall is one of the ones from the DLC, and honestly, I don't even know why this one even exists. It's like an iframe dodge with like a really long starting up frame and really long recovery frame, so it's going to be outclassed by something like Blood and Step, because that one even consumes less FP, it's much faster, and you can actually dodge in every single direction. With Windfall, you can only really dodge forward, and I don't really know why you really get like a follow-up attack with this actual, because the death type weapons get a version of Windfall, but they actually get follow-up attack. So I don't know why we couldn't pair this alongside like an axe or a hammer and get its own unique version of a follow-up attack. That would be pretty cool, but yeah, it feels like it's pretty just lazy design and it's going to be. Number 111, Piercing Throw, which is one of the skills that can be infused onto the Smith Script Dagger, and this one is just meant as like a sniping-based option, so to speak, for this weapon, because it can go a little bit further like the regular moveset and the Smith Script Dagger gets. But the thing is, it's still like this one regular throwing blade. Not going to just. It can't carry through.
I want Robinson on this fucking team now.
But that's rarely going to ever happen. Like, you're better off just taking a couple more steps forward and using an actual moveset, but it's going to be infinitely better.
We'll do 92 seconds for Busil and Robinson. Will that go through? No.
I would put this weapon because you can just remove the weapons and it's have the vulnerability to hit in itself. Now, in the other games, it was pretty useful because it was part of your base kit, and you can just hit with basically every single weapon, and it probably breaks shields. It can kind of just stagger enemies slightly sometimes, with like every single weapon to do anyway. 109 Ghost Flame Pole, which is one of the ones from the DLC. The design of this is identical to the Deathstone one to the Deathstone, because that one actually do really good damage. This thing just sucks. Any other soft skill instead. But 108 Shield Back. But this is a very small, short-range attack with the shield set. It can stagger enemies like knights and tokens if you really wanted to use it that way. Maybe have like small touch weapons that otherwise wouldn't really have that ability to do it. But if you use the shield to do so, it is a very easy use. And also I think things like shield crack could do this exact same thing, but it's way better. 107 Storm Stomp. Now this skill is primarily meant for PvP, as it can like stun lock enemies and actually have guaranteed follow-up attacks, which in PvE is basically useless because the focus actually stagger enemies long enough to get like a light attack or a heavy attack up, because you can just do that already, and enemies actually don't be able to dodge around all the time. And this thing doesn't really stagger that many enemies in PvP either. You're better off using like any other damaging type of skill, like you're going to do deflectable damage, more advanced damage, and it's better than the complementary weapon. 106 Wall of Sparks, which is up to trophy models. This one resulting in like this 360-degree AoE attack. It can go pretty far, do some 15 damage, but the reach side don't count it at all, just because the heavy attack already does this for you, but it's actually just better as well, because it gets stun lock better, it does more damage damage, it comes down a bit faster, and there's obviously nothing to do with any MP. Like Wall of Sparks can go a little bit further, and maybe do a little bit more damage than Infinite Talisman, but it's just not really worth using at all. 105 Parry, which is the regular parry skill, which a lot of skills already come with this passively, and parrying in this game is very neat. 90% of the enemies can be parried, and the very small selected that can be parried sometimes require multiple successful attempts just to be able to get to the riposte. And even if you do want to parry, things like parry retaliation are definitely much better, and it does give you more parry frames, because regular parry, especially with medium shields, are not that good at all. And this could be a good early game option actually against this kind of retaliation, but it is a bump with its half processes anyway. 104 pellet charge, which is one of the worst damaging skills I think in the entire game. The only benefit that it does serve is picking up the stun lock smaller types of enemies. If you get larger ones, it just sucks. If you can hit slots at the great styles, you get a whole bunch of bleed put up and some nice health regen. But the thing is, there are so many other skills in this game that can also just hit multiple times quickly and just give you a bunch of bleed put up and a bunch of health regen, while taking some respectable damage. Stuff like Storm Puller or Wild Strikes are just going to be much better options in my opinion. I was talking about the failure as far as the pellet charge would. You actually could power them great stars and have your offhand one just have pellet charge, and then go into your legacy dungeon. You could just use it against a trash bomb to just get a whole bunch of health back really quick. But the thing is, Prayer for Strike just does this way better. With every single hit, with Prayer for Strike, gives you 30% of your health back.
There's a way to enhance athletic ability. Fire.
Now getting into the C tier, this is going to consist of skills that are like borderline trash, or like actually somewhat average, but they're just very niche. And at 103 we have no skill, which kind of falls under that category. The only use that this skill has is to slap it onto a shield, so you can actually like block and use the skill of your main weapon at the same time, because sometimes you don't want to actually default to using your shield-based skill, but yeah, that's the only use that it has. 102 Golden Slam. Now this is a short-range AoE attack. You actually get some really good high armor, 9 stance damage. The total overall damage is not that bad. You can put it on almost every single weapon in the game. Now the thing is, I just consider it to be outclassed by Ground Slam, because that's the exact same thing, but it does physical damage instead, which is just a much better damage type, because your holy damage, even with the DLC, probably still is the worst damage type in the game. Now this one actually does scale off faith, whereas the other one scales off strength, so it does require different builds, but if you already have a faith-based build, there's lots of different AoEs you actually already have access to that are much better than Ground Slam in my opinion. Number 101, Glint's Blade Phalanx. Now this skill got nerfed way too hard in my opinion. It went from doing like almost 40 stance damage to less than 20, which is just like the only good thing that it actually had going for it, because the damage just sucks, the follow-up attack is not really that good, and it's probably just overall outclassed by Glintstone Pebble, as that one's going to be a much more easy to use type of skill with just more damage, because in its current state, I don't really value it that much. Still going to do a little bit of stance damage, you still get access to the follow-up attack, which can do a bit more stance damage, but overall, I just don't really see much value in it. Number 100, Poisonous Mist. Now, Poison as a status effect is pretty shit in this game, not gonna lie. It does like 6% damage over 9 seconds, which for comparison, the worst version of Scarlet Rot does like 16% damage over 90 seconds. So yeah, even though this thing can drop poison pretty quickly, it's not that good. Now, there can be one specific use of like pairing it alongside the poison-based buffs, like Candid or Rock Exaltation Talisman, or the Mushroom Crown. You could just like lead up a boss fight with this, have these buffs equipped, and for the next 20 seconds with any single type of build, you're just going to get a bunch more damage. You don't necessarily have to have Poisonous Mist equipped onto your main weapon. But the thing is, with this type of playstyle, I'm probably better off using Chilling Mist instead, because Chilling Mist is going to give you a very similar benefit, where you're just going to drop the better status effect and just save in a talisman slot too. Number 99, Holy Ground. Now this is a shield-based skill that does some of this holy-based magic sigil on the ground, and when standing upon this magic sigil, you actually get a whole bunch of health regen and more damage negation, and the health regen is actually 18 health per second, which is more than Blessing of the Earth Tree. You get 20% damage negation, which is also really good. Now the thing is, it involves you having to stand inside of this small circle, which if you're trying to stand inside this small circle, more likely than not, you're going to get hit because you're playing around doing that. But honestly, the whole thing is just counterintuitive. Now, there might be some instances where you can use some slower types of skills, or the Iron Jar Aromatic, and this playstyle might be pretty good, but honestly, I think this skill would have benefited much more if it was like an aura buff, or if like the AoE was like 3 times as large. Number 98, Carrion Greatsword, which this is a very high damaging magic-based skill. You can charge it up to do nice stance damage, really good damage. You don't really get any high promo, might not be the easiest thing to use, but it definitely is amazing. Now the reason why it's still going to get lower in the C tier is because Carrion Grandeur outclasts it, and that's outclassed by Carrion Sovereignty. So yeah, it's just completely outclassed. 97, Shield Strike. Now this skill can be equipped onto the shield, and all it does is just give you the light attack combo for your skill. It doesn't actually consume any FP at all, but the main reason why it exists is because you can have your thrusting shield in your left hand, and when you click L2 or the skill-based button, you can also do a light attack as well, and also just get the ability to block on top of this. Which the light attacks of the thrusting shields are actually pretty good. They do nice stance damage, they're pretty quick, they do piercing damage, but yeah, that's basically the only use of this Ash of War. 96 Storm Assault. Now this skill is probably going to be mainly for PvP, as it does like stun lock enemies and do like amazing damage, but in PvE, it basically stun locks nothing, even like enemies like Millennia or Knights doesn't stagger them whatsoever, and honestly it just sucks in terms of tracking. The damage is not really that good. With a longer animation, you can get staggered out of it too. There are like plenty of other different types of like storm-based skills, or other different types of smaller-based skills that can pair alongside a pole weapon, but they're going to perform much better than this one. Number 95, Poison Moth Bites. Now how this works is that when you put poison on an enemy and use this skill, it does a flat percentage of damage, in this instance 5% damage, which is identical to the Poison Flower Wounds Twice skill in the DLC. Now that one is going to be way better because it does more damage, lunges further, you can pair it alongside any weapon, also does Scarlet Rot, so it's just going to be the much better version. But even if that version didn't exist, I still would put this lower on the list, because yeah, it's just not that good. It has a terrible lunge, you get
Someone's moving on this monitor.
Number 94, Golden Parry. Now, I have no idea why they nerfed this skill as much as they did, but it used to be like the best parry skill in the game. Parrying in this game was still pretty niche, so I don't really understand the change. But basically, it hits just as many parry frames now as a medium shield parry, which is like a very small amount, and it's going to be very hard to try and land the parry. Now, still, it actually doesn't add a distance for a small XP cost, but otherwise, I would just never really bother with this, because time affiliation now, this is going to be the much better version. Number 93, Vow of the Indomitable. Now this is a very niche shield-based skill, in that it only gives you a bunch of iframes, which can be pretty good, but you're just staying in the one location. It gets pretty long recovery frames, so one can spend this over and over again to just get infinite iframes. The only use that it does have is being able to like counter or just dodge these like lingering effects AoE attacks where some attacks that are just otherwise harder to dodge. You could just use this one to counter them, which is a very niche use, and even then it's probably outclassed by the Raptor of the Myth skill. Number 92, Stand Sweep, which this is one of a bunch of different types of like harder hitting skills that you can equip with the larger type of weapons, and I find this one to be one of the least valuable ones, as the animation is pretty long, and at the same time it doesn't really make up for it either, and it is considered to be directly outclassed by Stand Uppercut, because that one is a bit quicker and can send enemies flying into the air. I kind of wish that these two skills were combined into one. That would have been really nice, but unfortunately that's not the case. Number 91, Mighty Shot. Now this is like the sniping based skill for like medium and small types of bows, which if you're going to be using a sniping based bow, great bows are just going to be much better at doing this. Now obviously these actually have higher strength requirements, so the dexterity build is probably better off with something like Mighty Shots, but even then I just rather have Rain of Arrows. I do believe that this skill complements the weapons much better. Number 90, Earthshaker, which is a strength-based skill that does share the exact same animation as things like Golden Land and Waves of Darkness, but I'm going to find those ones much more interesting as they do have a lot more things going for them, as this one is just like a short-range AoE attack, which compared to things like Ground Slam and Flora Loose Earthshaker, I'm just going to prefer those ones much more, as this skill does have a longer animation and less hyper roll. Number 89, Through and Through, which is one of the sniping-based options for the great bows. Now this one is more so as like a collapse-based option, because it can like shoot through enemies and actually hit multiple enemies at once. And actually is some like unique interactions with some arrows against large type of bosses, and that it can hit them multiple times. But I think things like Rain of Arrows could do this exact same job but better. And also Egon's Drake Hunt, which is the actual one in the DLC, is like a much better version of a sniping-based skill, because it can just do more damage. But Through and Through is going to be the base game, so you can just use this one until you actually get there. Number 88, Gravitas. Now, I don't value this skill whatsoever. It is like a short-range magic attack, doesn't do that good of damage, doesn't get any height from it, the same damage is pretty poor as well. The entire gimmick of sucking the enemy in towards you is honestly more of a downside if anything, and also if you just wanted to go with this skill, I'd rather just go with the Alabaster's Lord Sword instead, because this version of the skill is much better as it goes like twice as far, and it does way more damage too. Number 87, Lifesteal Fist. Now this skill can very well just cheat a lot of smaller enemies in the game, specifically things like knights and soldiers, because it actually does perform as a grab attack, and you can just like instantly grab them over and over again, and just get a whole bunch of damage off, and actually get a whole bunch of health regen. Now the reason why I still don't get this low on the list is because 90% of the enemies can't be grabbed, so it's like a very niche thing. You could just like have a secondary fist base weapon, just level it up, have Lifesteal Fist equipped onto it, and probably use it when you're struggling against some certain types of knights, but that's about it. Number 86, Warcry, which is one of the few different raw types of weapon buffs, all of which actually giving you a damage boost and changing up your heavy attack. Now for the most part, it actually changes up your heavy attack for the worst, because in most cases when you're actually using charge heavy attacks, you want to go with the stand spring. And with Warcry heavy attack changes, it makes the animation last a lot longer. Now there are some instances where like the heavy attack is a lot better than what it used to be, specifically with things like polearms and whatnot. But I still think that Warcry is still outclassed by things like Braggart's Roar, because the heavy attack changes are basically the exact same, but Braggart's Roar just gives you a better damage boost, more defenses, and actually faster stamina recovery speed, whereas Warcry doesn't get anywhere near as many benefits. But Warcry is a faster animation, and you get running benefits of the skills by just having them one-handed, whereas Braggart's Roar you actually have to have them two-handed. Number 85, Barrage. Now this is a bow-based skill that lets you just rapid fire a bunch of arrows. Now, per arrow, the damage is going to be worse as of the status effects compared to like a regular arrow shot, but the DPS is still going to be overall higher, and so it's going to be really easy to use, and in most cases, it can actually like melt enemies somewhat quickly, but even then, it's still like an arrow, so it's not going to do as much damage as you would like, and it's not going to be as efficient as using like the regular bow movesets. Number 84, Rolling Sparks, which is probably the best skill to equip onto the Perfect Bottles, which really isn't saying much as I only really get a handful of options to begin with. But Rolling Sparks is still okay. It goes relatively far. It can actually explode multiple times. Against larger bosses, it's really good. Against smaller enemies, it is definitely not, because enemies like to move around a whole bunch. Rolling Sparks doesn't really have that tracking potential, and you're only going to be able to explode with like one or two different parts of the projectile, so it's not good at all. And against larger bosses, you're better off using the running heavy attacks with the Perfect Bottles, as they're actually pretty decent and definitely the best part about the weapon. But it actually does go pretty far with Rolling Sparks, so giving like larger bosses to add like a distance is probably going to be its only use. Number 83, Charge Force, which is one of the handful of types of poking attack skills. And all poking attack skills are really good. This one's probably better for PvP against like stun-lock enemies, whereas in PvE, against enemies that cannot be staggered, is like borderline useless. I would much rather have things like Impairing Thrust. And yes, it actually can hit multiple times with this skill, so that people like the multi-hit talismans or status effects build that can be pretty good, but I think something like Repeating Thrust or Blood Packs can outclass this one. Number 82, White Shadow's Allure. Now this skill works very similar to the alluring skulls from the previous games, and that it throws up this little dummy for like enemies to get aggro towards. Now for stealth-based combat, things like Assassin's Gambit are probably just a lot better, but if you are in like the middle of a fight and enemies are aggro towards you, you can just use this to redirect their attention, which would be pretty good for like most of the game, but to get it all the way in the concentrated snowfield would definitely make some of its usefulness a lot less important. Number 81, Sacred Ring of Light. Now this skill is a holy based projectile attack that you can consecutively cast over and over again with some polearm types weapons. Now the thing is, this skill is just completely outclassed by the Halo side, because that version of the skill works very similar, but it just goes way further, staggers better, and does a bunch more damage for only 2 more MP costs. If you actually like this aesthetic, then it's going to be a much better weapon. But obviously this is an actual war, so you can infuse it into other different types of weapons. So if you actually want to fight anything like with the fire damage or holy damage, you can always switch back and forth. But even then, something like Sacred Blade are probably just going to value more. Number 80, Raging Beast, which is a skill of the Beast Force that actually does do this little iframe dodge into like a jumping attack. Now the thing is, I didn't value it much because it doesn't do that good of damage. It's a long animation. It has you jump into the air, which means that sometimes you cannot jump into an attack. And the follow-up attacks also have a long animation and also just don't do as much damage. And I don't really know what they're really thinking with this thing to have it be such a long animation, no hype drama, pretty poor damage, no stance damage. Like, it's pretty fun to use, but it kind of just sucks. Number 79, Spinning Weapon. Now this skill can hit many times in quick succession, potentially proc status effects really quickly, can do some nice damage, and you also can like stand perpendicular to an enemy to give like a long part of the blade, especially if you're using things like polearm types weapons. Now the thing is, I don't really care for it as much as other different types of spinning skills, so when you're actually using smaller types of weapons, I'd rather have things like Spinning Slash, because they can stun lock better, do more stance damage. With larger types of weapons, stuff like Stormcaller and Spinning Strikes are just going to do way more damage, more stance damage, better stun lock potential, and probably just be safer as well. This one is okay, it's not too bad, but they're just much better options in my opinion.
Start strong with best-in-class equipment at Planet Fitness.
Now getting into the B tier, this is going to consist of a bunch of like really average skills that sometimes probably have a couple of niche uses. Sometimes it means that they're actually really good, but they're probably outclassed by something else. But getting in at number 78, we have Raptor of the Mist. Now this is an iframe dodging skill that does result in a jump, which being able to immediately jump after an opening starts means you actually can just maximize your damage and get a whole bunch of attacks off potentially, but can pair nicely alongside some jumping attack types of builds. Now, it doesn't really give you a bunch more iframes than you normally would with a dodge roll, so some types of attacks that are harder to dodge, or that are basically impossible to dodge, you might be able to with Rapture of the Mists. Now, the thing is with this skill, I kind of wish I had a bit more going for it, because it is pretty hard to actually land an attack when you're just jumping directly up and down, because normally with jumping attacks, you actually can get some like lateral movements and actually jump pretty far forward, but with Rapture of the Mists, you're just going straight up and straight down, so in a lot of cases, you might just be able to miss. You also can't iframe dodge certain types of attacks and status effects, like Millennia's Healing, like the Malekith's Dust and Death effects. You can't be able to dodge those things at all with Rapture of the Mists. And I kind of wish I had like a bit of a damage boost, because like with skills in this game, there's no like broken and there's so many different types of weapon buffs that just help boost your damage, but I feel like something like Rapture of the Mists could have been a bit more than just like an iframe dodge. Number 77, Determination, which is a very solid weapon buff. It boosts your damage by 60%, but it is only for your next attack, because after you hit the little once, then it's just going to remove the effect and you have to reapply it, which is a pretty quick animation, so it's not too bad, but it does pair very nicely alongside some charged heavy attack builds, which charged heavy attack builds, especially early on, are really good because you have access to the Spikes tier and the Act Talisman, and all these three items you get right in Limb Break, so it actually can just break open the entirety of the early game very easily with something like this. Now the thing is, I'm not going to value it as much later in the game, because things like Royal Knight's Resolve exist. This is basically the exact same thing, but just 80% more damage instead. And you also can get access to stuff like Cracked Blade, which I'm probably going to throw more with charged heavy attack builds too. Number 76, Lightning Wreck, which yes, despite the memes of this thing looking kind of stupid, it actually is genuinely a good skill. It is lightning skill, scales up dexterity, can do some really nice damage for only 5 MP per swing or per spin, and actually can be lower to the ground as well, so a lot of attacks might end up going over your head, and the damage is actually really good. Now, it does have the downsides of obviously like being close to the enemy, so it might be a bit risky. The starting animation might be a bit too long, the stamina cost might be too high, and I kind of wish it got boosted by things like the Death Knight set on the DLC. It actually boost a bunch of lightning skills, but this one is not included for some reason. That would have been pretty nice. So it actually is a pretty fun and good skill to use. Nice lighting option for dexterity build, probably the best one at that. But it probably just lacks a little bit more damage, and it might be a bit risky still. Number 75, Loretta's Slash. Now this skill actually can lunge in pretty far, stun-lock some small types of enemies, do okay damage, okay stand damage. Now the thing is, there are pretty other skills that could probably do this as well. They can also lunge in pretty far, but probably do more damage, more stance damage, and just have better synergy with other different types of builds, because Loretta's Slash is a magic-based skill, so you're kind of limited in different types of infusions. Number 74, Barbaric Roar. Now this is one of those skills that change up your heavy type in this weapon buff, very similar to Warcry, and as I talked about that one, I don't really value them as much because it changes up your heavy attacks to have these longer animations, which they can do really nice damage, they can potentially stun lock nicely, but they're going to have longer animations, therefore they're not going to be able to stand straight as quick, and it's kind of really your only way to be able to do something like that. And also for Barbaric Roar, even though some different types of heavy type options could be pretty nice, like with the Greatsword, with the Spears could be pretty funny and have some nice stun lock potential, but I think Bragator is still going to outclass it outright because it does give you a better buff, and some of the pairings, especially with hold-on type weapons, are just going to be much better. Number 73, Bloodhound Step. Now, in a game where weapon skills do lots of damage or just give you really good buffs, it's pretty rare that you want to optimally build around a skill that just boosts your neutral game, which Bloodhound Step is pretty good. It's a nice dodge, can actually cover in a lot of distance really quickly, can actually help you retreat and actually gain a lot of distance. It could also be pretty good at dodging some attacks that otherwise are probably hard to dodge with a regular dodge roll, but sometimes with how far that it actually can dodge, you might just like overshoot your target and it's be in a really bad position. So there can be some instances where Bloodhound Step is very useful, but I don't think that dodge roll is that bad. You want to sacrifice really good damaging skills to use something like this. Number 72, Scattershot. Now this is a skill that you can only equip onto this Smith Script Dagger. Now it does come passive with it Balls of Night, but with other Smith Script Daggers is that enemies can dodge it very easily, especially if they're skinnier and more mobile. And things like Scattershot can help counteract that, and it does serve as like a nice AoE. When things like to dodge around, they're still going to hit, and at close range you can stagger pretty well, potentially hit some headshots. It's like a nice complement to the weapon, not the most useful thing in the world. I probably still wouldn't recommend using it with a blade-based infusion, because the damage is really bad, and at that point you're better off just using like Balls of Night, but it still is very nice. Number 71, Stamp Upward Cut, which is a very high damaging type of skill that you can equip onto large types of weapons. Does actually have some nice height armor, can send enemies flying into the air, does some good stance damage. Now am I getting value with more so than things like Lion's Claw or Giant Hunt? probably not. I would have valued it a lot more if it actually could be combined with the other different type of stand skill, and have stand sweep and uppercuts together in one, have some more versatility, but for the most part, it's a bit too slow in my opinion, for me to want to use it over things like Ryan's Fall. Number 70, Lightning Slash. Now this is a skill that actually performs with a lightning close range AoE attack, and actually can buff you up with more lightning damage for roughly 40 seconds. Now I think the buff is probably the best part about it. In early game, having the flat damage buff can be really good, but once you get later on in the game, it's definitely going to be less useful. And overall, I don't really care much for like the damage portion of this skill, because it is like a close range attack. It doesn't get much hype from, somewhat of a longer animation, and consumes a bit of FP. It can be a nice option for like dexterity type builds, but I think there are lots of different other types of skills paired alongside some quicker types of weapons that could just be better than this one. Number 69, Troll's Roar. Now this is definitely a very underrated skill in this game. It can only be equipable onto large types of weapons, and there are two different parts to it. There is the roar effect and the big downward slam. Now this roaring effect is actually really good. It can send smaller enemies down to the ground, and it can do a total of 40 stance damage and a nice AoE, which is really good because you can speak them in its parts over and over again. And if you do have the option or the opening attack to get this ball being summoning attack, you might as well just go for it. But in most cases, I wouldn't really bother with it, because it doesn't really do that good of damage. It is like a really long animation, and in most cases, it's going to take a bunch of damage in the meantime. But this like roar attack is actually really good. Number 68, Thunderbolts. Now this is a lightning-based projectile attack, does scale purely off dexterity. You can spam it over and over again, it's pretty cheap. The initial cost can be a bit too long, but if you actually just get into the momentum or just keep spamming it, you actually can output some decent amount of DPS. Now the stance damage or the stagger potential is probably going to be like the worst part about it, and it kind of makes me prefer like other different types of dexterity-based projectiles a bit more. Things like Beast Roll, Stoneblade, Ice Spear, I'm probably going to value those a little bit more so than Thunderbolt, but if you did find some enemies with some lightning damage, you could just switch to this one. Number 67, All Frost Stomp, which is a cold-based skill that you can get relatively early on in the game. It does serve as a nice AoE, does some decent damage, can drop frost pretty quickly, but yeah, this is very easy to use, it's cheap, you can't really go too wrong. I think like the worst part about it is going to be its total damage. It's not going to get too high, and it's going to be outclassed by Divine Beast Frost Stomp, which is in the DLC. It's just like a much better version. Basically the exact same attack, but it just can be fully charged to do more damage. It actually does do at least some stance damage, because regular Frost Stomp literally does 0 stance damage.
At Montana's, comfort is a feeling and a flavor. Dig into our comfort classics. Thick cut smokehouse maple bacon, maple brisket smash, and the twisted Reuben. Why not pair it with a Molson Canadian? Cozy up at Montana's, Canada's home for barbecue.
66 Ground Slam, which is a very decent AoE attack, as I talked about earlier with Golden Slam. Basically the exact same thing, nice high promo, good stance damage, it's a good pairing alongside some smaller type weapons that otherwise don't get the ability to stance break pretty quickly, and this one can do it for you. Now this is going to primarily scale on the strength stat, which might be a bit of a downside if you were to use some smaller, quicker type weapons that might scale better on dexterity. And also I just consider it to be outclassed by a Aura Loop Star Shaker, which it might be a bit more risky. You don't really get as much high armor as a Ground Slam, but you can just get way more damage and way more stance damage in a larger AoE, and you also get a bit later in the game. The Ground Slam does have its uses, but it still might be a little bit outclassed. Number 65, Shared Mortar. Now this is an aura buff that actually does boost your damage, very similar to Golden Valve, but actually doesn't really boost it for as much damage. Golden Valve is about 12% damage, this one being 10% damage, but it actually does last 15 seconds longer, so sometimes in some boss fights, you're probably better off just using something like this instead, because more likely than not, the fight's going to last longer than 45 seconds. However, it actually doesn't boost your defenses, unlike Golden Valve, so I don't really consider it to be as useful, but it actually does have the secondary effect of doing bonus damage to undead enemies. So skeletons or death birds, you can just do 50% more damage to these enemies with a skill like this one, and it's an aura buff, so you're going to slap it onto a dagger, use the skill, switch back to your main weapons, and benefit of this much more damage to these enemies. Now the Golden Epitaph buff does this like way better, it boosts it by like 100% more damage, which is like literally twice as effective. And that one actually does require a little bit of faith investment, but I still recommend us going with that one if you just do have a little bit of faith. Number 64, Flame Skewer. Now this is a flame art-based skill from the DLC. It does share a very similar animation to Giant Hunt, but it's not going to be anywhere near as good in terms of damage, stance damage, nor does it send enemies flying into the air like that. But it actually does get the follow-up fire attack, which is going to scale primarily off faith, and it can do some nice damage. Do like an additional 15 stance damage, which is pretty good, and also a buff weapon with more fire damage for about 15 seconds, which is okay. Now for the most part, I just consider this to be outclassed by Flame Spear. because flame speed also does buff the weapon, but it buffs it for like 40 seconds. It's also going to buff it faster, for less FP, have a faster animation, also has the ability to be fully charged, which actually does turn it into a projectile attack, and just ultimately make it do more damage as well. So I just think that one is just a better option overall. This one can like stun lock a little bit better and can like initially come at it a bit faster, but I just think that Flame Spirit is going to be the better one. Number 63 is Savage Claws, which is one of the skills that is for the Beast Claws. And I think this is the best pairing for this weapon, as it does actually stun lock enemies very nicely, can hit multiple times in quick succession, help proc the multi-hit talismans, it actually can proc status effects really quickly. You do get stuck in somewhat of a longer animation, but thankfully you actually can cancel the last part of it, so it's not really that risky. Now, for the most part, I think Beast Claws are just like outclassed by regular claws because I'm just getting way higher DPS, and even if you do account for the skill, it's still not going to get as much. Now, the stun lock potential is there, but if I wanted to use a Beast Claw, I'd rather just go with the Red Bear's Claw because the skill of this weapon is somewhat similar, but it can just stun much better and its output much higher damage. So it's okay, but it's still a little bit outclassed. Number 62, Golden Link. Now, this is a holy based skill that you can only equip on the larger types of weapons, and it is actually a nice little 2-for-1 type of skill. It serves like a short range AoE attack, and it can be like a nice sniping option as well. Now, the fact that it does do holy damage is going to be a downside, because like a lot of enemies in the base game is being very resistant to it. Now, thankfully, the DLC actually has gotten a bit better, due to like some enemies being weak to it, and it's more buffs that you can pair alongside with this. And you can also pair this up alongside the Great Stars to actually get some more health regen for every single one of the projectiles, which is pretty cool. Now, for the most part, you can expect it to a Fate build when using this, because it does scale purely off Fate. And if you have Fate build, you're going to be using some spells, and its Golden Lance better for like a lot of different sniping options out there, like Frenzy Bird, probably not, and there's probably some better AoE spells that you can use on other types of holy spells, and the probably just cover this game anyway. But it can actually just cover two different things for once, and change one to save those and damage slots, just by having this skill of this, but it's still not going to be like the most amazing thing in terms of damage and best out of everything. Number 61, the Redstone Pebble, which is like a very basic magic projectile attack. Also, it does have a little bit of intelligence. It still doesn't really go with that spot. It might still eventually end up being as much for the spells, as the spell for this eventually
Ooh, he wants to come here. Okay.
So you can get on a very small variant of options. You can also keep the entire game.
I play first line mode.
Just like set it at a distance. And with the little order that we have to have a follow-up attack, which can be some nice damage, some nice stand damage. Now, for the most part, I think this skill is directly on top of the Redstone first skill, as a Redstone ability is just, you can be moved hard for can go waiting for them to do some damage. But it's not the same thing with the other super weapons. If you have to do the data, you could just try to watch that on the great tools, but I think there are just better just projectiles out there that also the scale with magic and do magic damage that could just perform better than this one. Number 60, Ego's Break Punch. Now this is like the sniping based skill for your break throws. It does really more damage and things like Fluid and Fluid. And most of the full both you will see. But break throws have a sniping base up there that's pretty good. They get the really far, and so it's the best what to use. You just need it. Number 59, we have a Beast Roll. This is a dexterity-based projectile attack. Actually does get pretty far. These are very nice damage, like this thing can change the entire game. Like I've not tried to roll as before, and this one is definitely one of the easiest ones, but the reason why still one gets low on the list is because it still gets outclassed by Stormblade, and Stormblade does actually go pretty far as well, but it is still not so much better, does more damage, actually has a quick box at closer range, and this can be spammed consecutively much faster than Beast Roll can. Now, Beast Roll is not going to be completely useless because Beast Roll can be equipped with Fate. Basically, every single weapon in the game, it can actually go a lot further than things like Storm Blade can. And also, you actually can get more monsters early on in the game, like the Rolling Galleys can help boost it, and things like the Pilot attacks as well. So it's not that bad of an option, but it's probably still, once again, a fair cost. Now for the 58 Skeleton, which is a pretty decent small defense type of skill. You actually can equip it on things like Alphabet and Red Axe, which is pretty funny, and closing the gap nicely, you can do it 18 minute damage. Now, getting something that's one recommendation doesn't really necessarily think it's the best thing in the world, or to the whole time, it's more interesting than it's really spikes there. And so the point that is rather helpful things like spinning slides, storm sword, or spinning strikes, if it's worth it, help with slow damage, get some spin damage, but this one actually does one thing pretty well, but I think that is very fierce, and the fact that it's like pretty flashy to use as well. Number 57, Waves of Darkness. Now this is a skill that's very similar to things like Golden Lane and Earthshaker, basically identical animation, that uses a large weapon, summon it to the ground, and it straight up with a big AoE. And in this instance, it's going to feel like a big gravity magic-based AoE attack. Obviously got a skill of intelligence, and the AoE can actually go pretty far. It can actually shoot out periodically over like a few seconds, but it can help stun lock smaller enemies for longer. The damage itself is not going to be too high. Now, thankfully, if you're compared a lot for the colder region, these magic wave attacks actually can help pop blocks as well. So it's pretty cool, an instinct pairing. But for the most part, still I think somewhat of a long recommendation, and those becomes like a big in the damage department too.
Your future begins here at Athabasca University. Your education, your story, your success. Join the ranks of Inspired.
Now, in the 6, we have Savage and Line Score. Now, this skill is considered to be an upgrade to regular Line Score. I don't think that it actually is, because the regular Line Score can do more damage and more stance damage in one hit, and also just like bottom enemies to the ground. Now, Savage Line Score can like one of the glitch with Turbo, which is the option for the full attack. It actually does take like a second and third time, and in this instance, it can also bottom enemies to the ground, do more damage, and do basically just as much stance damage. But there aren't going to be many bosses out there that actually let you have an opening for that long. And if they do, you probably just get a better off just using 2 line score attacks, which is one probably not going to be as efficient, but it's going to have to do way more damage and way more damage. Now, Savage line score can be like multiple times the follow-up stacks. The body better with like the multiple enhancement or status specs maybe, but like a very small use, and for the most part, I don't really consider it to be as good as line score. So yes, once again, another like feature of things that this can really unboxed. Number 55, we have Carrying Allegiance, what I consider the best parry skill in the game. And parrying in this game, I still consider to be somewhat niche because a lot of enemies cannot be parried, and the ones that can be parried require multiple successful attempts. And even in these instances, stance breaking build up probably is going to be better, but there are some cases where like parrying tends to be really easy to pull off, and this one is just going to do it the best. Because when you start this one like either medium shield or small shield, you're actually going to get some of the most, if actually get most parry frames, because in every other different out parry, and also don't consider any types of FG as well. Unless you actually use parry and deflect projectile attacks, specifically like magic or like spell-based projectiles, where you can turn it into your own attack itself. I would think you have in some cases, but like it's not going to be like the most amazing damage, but for the most part, if you use this type of skill, it's just to be able to use it as a regular parry. Number 54, overhead stance. So this skill is triple and to be great with Katana. And just like all stance-based skills, they can be really good in output and high enough damage. And that would help us a lot more, because the way that it stands right now, this skill is just up fast by stance of the freezing stars and blood types, because those actually get 49, up off the multi-hit cast umbrella, get more bleed build up, and just produce the ability to skill piercing damage, because it's a better damage type more so than slashing damage, which you kind of already get a lot of with the Great Katana. Now, the existence of the Rolana's cameo actually does make this somewhat useful, because with the Rolana's cameo, it actually can outdamage things like blood attacks and release of cross, but that very default you having to have that margin of it, which is another powerful slot, and you have to charge it up first, so it's not going to be for a second, but over, you can have a longer animation, you can have it to charge it up, and the benefits are not really as great as spinning by the feeling of blood attacks. Number 23, of the ring. I guess this still was very good as good as it used to be, but just like blink play buns, and I think you get served to a stand damage and hold on. But thankfully still is somewhat decent, and it does serve as a nice AoE projectile attack that does help building on strength, a bit of a fire-based skill. If you do have a strength-based build, like some fire damage option or like a projectile option, you could go with something like this, and you can launch with a Freya's Greatsword, and you can help boost damage even further, which is pretty nice. I just think it was a bit too hard in strength damage, and also things like Flaming Strike resist, which is like another skill that scales up strength. It looks somewhat similar. The AoE projectile doesn't look as strong, but the whole attack obviously going to take you more damage, damage, and buff the weapon. But not everything about the Flaming Strike, so the box will really use this. 52 and driving as well. Now this is still like the ability to complete anything in parts, and actually gives this nice warrior attack that gives a nice damage against unlock all these smaller enemies like ice really well, and it can basically every single one of them, and it's just status build up. I guess somewhere boss that or something to get the monkey stagger, but it's obvious in this general. I would never really use this game, especially against certain target enemies, because it seems like it's way slower and attacks way slower than otherwise other against slow attacking enemies. And instead of front that I would just rather use like that actual combos on weapons, because like that anti-attack combos, and you do like a very similar job. But if I actually going to just skill build it, I'd much rather have things like power blast, and I think that that's still in a better complement of weapon.
There's a good way to enhance analytics performance. 5 to 10% in the market. Thing.
Again, I'm getting into the A tier. This is going to be the stuff that's in all the really good. If you want the good stuff, sometimes they might not be as good as I would think it's maybe kind of good as possibly going to might still be a little bit out of but it's good. But at number 51, you have the first reason plus. So this is one of the playing attack type skill. There's something on good with the stun button and probably status specs. And again, all small type of enemies, this skill is very well cheaper. I think it's in 7 FP and you get stun locking for days. Now against large type of bosses, I probably wouldn't really bother. So you do get stun and longer animation. And you probably don't want to be winning that trade. And rather switch to things like instead thrust or casing thing instead in these instances. Plus, you can put this skill alongside stuff like the sword banks or bracelet counters, which these get really high percent AR and really good status build up. And it's like a very working there, even if it's good large type of bosses that is not going to stand a chance. But the reason why it's not going to fit into the S tier is because I consider what types to be the better alternative. If you have identical animation, doesn't really get as much damage, but it does give you a bunch of health regen. And also, blood types does get boosted by the arms box set, and the damage difference from having the selective is not that big, but it still does more damage, and also this can take like after like an FP. At 50, we have the range of powers, so this I consider to be the best skill to equip on all different types of birds, doesn't matter what it is, light, medium, great birds, this is just the one, because it actually makes you do a little bit of flexible damage, and it's incredibly simple. I mean, it's 1 hour, maybe just like raining down like 30 different arrows from the sky, and against larger bosses, it's doing amazing damage, especially if you're using a great bow, and you can also help from some specs quickly. But yeah, they didn't have to do that well. They have this slightly larger enemy, they can shoot pretty nicely. Even if smaller enemies feel like stuff like them, it is really good and a nice solid complement to your body. So there are pretty decent weapon spots for the most part, and it's probably because of the skill. Number 49 has Eruption, which is a skill for larger types of weapons. Actually does serve as somewhat anti-based AoE attack, does primarily scale up the strength attack as well. If you are lacking some fire damage with a strength-based build, you could use something like this. And as of the DLC releasing, there's you can get 50% more damage with a skill like this, which is an awesome option burst. And the damage can be really good. It kind of lacks in a bit of strength damage, being a smaller strength skill or longer animation. So there's a lot of different bosses, especially in the DLC. It might not perform the best because then it doesn't really keep that all of the openings. But there are some bosses where I probably would rather switch to this one, specifically the ones that are weaker to fire damage. But outside of that, there are other different types of like slower skills that you put on the larger weapons. We probably later on this list that can just perform better. Number 48, Shield Craft. Now, honestly, this one I like the direct upgrade to Shield Craft, but as I mentioned with that skill, it's going to be paired nicely alongside some smaller types of weapons that kind of struggle and staggering these larger types of enemies like knives and whatnot, and Shield Craft can just spread up this front of them and then send them flying to the ground, and also can do very nice damage depending on what type of shield that you have. You give a great shield and turn one side stat spec, that can be a pretty decent primary based option, but I think that the early use of shield fitness thinks that they are in this type of game, I can't really put it in higher. Number 47, Sacred Order. This is a weapon buff that is boosted the damage by 10%. I think there's a lot of other options in the game, things like Crash Blow, Roll Not Resolve, Dragon Claw, that's probably just going to end up being better. Weapon buffs for its skill, but the good thing about Sacred Order is that it actually puts the buff onto both hands. So you actually can put Sacred Order weapon like a dagger in your off hand, use the skill, and then your main hand is also going to get 10% damage to it. So if you guys want to go like a skill-based build, you're just going to get 10% more damage to it. And it also does work with your spells. Now, typically with spells, those are set up a staff or a certain basic damage anyway, before you're not going something like that. Now, there is a spell that actually doesn't get some catalyst to boost the damage. You could just go with something like this. There's also a skill-based build, there's like another way to optimize it. But this actually doesn't involve you having to just have a dagger and flip it all times. As soon as you remove it, you lose the buff. Where you want to shoot the weapon, it's not going to be something that's for you. But it does give you the ability to do bonus damage against them and skeletons, death birds. There's just another way to just help them really quickly.
Yep, fresh.
You can get a bunch of damage against these death birds. At 26, we have One Slash, which is a like easy to bring link-based projectile attack. Actually does scale purely off arcane, and it's no hitting with it like a point blank range doesn't make it do bonus damage, and like it doesn't actually have a weapon box, it's just purely a projectile attack. And the damage can be really nice, the bleed through can be there as well. It's probably just meant for like this maximum damage in one hit with an arcane talent build. It's probably better alongside some smaller types of weapons, because otherwise with lots of weapons you kind of